Please welcome Patrick Lee.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patrick Lee. I will be performing 3 pieces. The first piece I'll be performing will be E Major Sonata, First Movement by Ludwig van Beethoven. Please enjoy. Ah!
Very nice. Thank you, Patrick. Thanks very much. And now I'd like to introduce Joe to you, who I've only sort of met and started to immerse myself in the work of lately, which has been a real regret of mine actually, because I was hanging around in the 80s and 90s when you guys were just what do they say?
In utero.
In utero. Twinkles in your parents' eyes. And the scene, the improvisation and avant-garde scene in Sydney was absolutely amazing. Lots of gigs everywhere and a lot of musicians, even ones who were in the mainstream, were immersing themselves in this improvisatory practice and accepting more noise and more non-orchestral and non-traditional instruments into the making of their music. But I shouldn't go on too long, please. Joe Truman.
Okay, now is this on? Yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay? No, it's not. Hello? Hello? Okay. Yeah, so, well, I'm presenting my work today as a neurodiverse artist, and that is basically as a synesthete. I see and feel the shape of colours of sounds. The colour, sound, shape, texture and density inform me as a singer, composer, performer and also visual artist. I keenly see and feel the emotional value and colour and how it manifests in shape and colour in my body. So I'll just So basically, as far as my singing goes, I wanted, as a younger person, to feel that my singing was I wanted to work towards a sense of authenticity, I suppose, and that my singing practice reflected sort of an inner life and what I was experiencing in my life and emotions. I was improvising from a very young age. I started classical piano training at about 3, and then was improvising. I used to sort of play fairies and witches, which could be translated these days into Christians and pagans, I don't know, but there was a sort of a dialogue between these two, and so narrative became quite important. And I loved mimicking sounds around me, like I mimicked my squeaky dolls. So I had one very favourite one called Clothes Peg. I can still do it. And that started this weird sort of exploration of my voice, which was really, apart from my father playing records of Schoenberg and Pierre Linaire, that might have influenced me. Yeah, so I did go on this rather sort of unusual journey. I left home quite young because of a family tragedy, so when I was living in Darlinghurst, I'd sneak into the Cell Block Theatre and sort of experiment with my voice, singing, and the sounds would come back to me and I'd see how far I could take things. I pushed boundaries, I mimicked birds, and sort of developed a sort of a vocabulary. And I did find, as well as studying art at art school and Alexander Mackie and so forth, I worked with improvisers such as Jim Denley and John Rose, and I was just keen to get to Europe to sort of feel like my weirdness would be a bit more normalised over there, because there are people like Phil Minton and Evan Parker and Maggie Nichols, all doing sort of, they're all striving for something similar. Like Phil was an established a great jazz singer, but he also just didn't want to toe the line as a sort of standard jazz singer, and so he also went on a sort of left of field track with his voice. I can play, I was also interested in nose singing and Japanese nose singing, and what fascinated me about that was how in the practice of traditional nose singing, there was such this concentration of energy behind the voice and focus in the body, that the body was really a vehicle for the sound, and it was an energetic vehicle. It wasn't just like the voice was a commodity, it wasn't a pop song, it was something very embodied that appealed to me. When I got to Europe, as I was fortunate to have an international study grant from the Australia Council to explore vocal improvisation and its application in contemporary music. I'll mention a couple of gigs I did there. This one was Songs from a Prison Diary. That was Phil Minton's and Varian Weston's initiative based on the poetry of Ho Chi Minh, who was incarcerated in a Chinese prison in 1942 and suspected of being a spy. And the whole work was based on his experience of prison in a day. This group was called Voices from Somewhere, and it involved 28 singers, all from different backgrounds, classical, jazz, rock, and just pure improvising singers. So I'll play a bit of what I had a role of as opening soloist. Sorry, which one is it? It's function F. Sorry, how do I get? Oh, I'm lost. How do I get back to this? Hold on. It's all right. It's okay. It's all right. It's all right. I'm just trying to get to. Sorry, I'm trying to get to Google. Yeah. How do I get onto my... I'm trying to bring up... Why can't I get... Can you tell me how I can get onto Google from... Can someone help me here? Yes. Thanks. Can't bring it across. Sorry. Just trying to bring up my SoundCloud account.
Where are you trying to get to?
SoundCloud account. Google.
SoundCloud. Well, Google's up on the screen if you
Yeah,
look at
I know,
this
but how do I get
screen.
it from here? Here.
Oh, do it from here. Hang on, see this over on the screen? Have a look at the screen. Just
Yeah,
go
okay,
there.
right. Okay.
Go there.
Alright.
Just type in
Alright.
there.
Okay, sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, it's all right.
Okay.
Sorry.
Cool.
Okay, so this introductory solo is with the Voices from Somewhere Choir, and this is performed, we performed at the Le Mans Jazz Festival and also the Strasbourg Musica Festival. This recording was made at the Strasbourg Musica Festival. And so you can hear when I was singing this, I went straight back into the Cell Block Theatre. I was thinking about prison and sort of using imagery to guide my improvisation, you know, feeling a sense of entrapment, but also trying to find ways out of the entrapment, which I imagine that possibly Ho Chi Minh was experiencing at the time. So. So that was part of the improvisation. So that sort of development of my vocalising really had a lot to do with also an introspective process of actually seeing emotional shapes, seeing them in my body, and sort of shaping them into sounds, and also drawing on imagery, like I said, of birds and so forth. Then I also worked with a guy called Jean Schwartz, and he's a French composer who works in electronics and was working at the Musée de l'Homme, and we embarked on a big session of about a week of just slab recording stuff, and he'd actually improvise with technology. So we tried different approaches to things. This particular improvisation, I'm sort of thinking of a trumpet as the opening riff, and he's sort of mucking around with his technology. There's not that much pitch shifting because I had a 3-octave range back then, and a bit less now. And so he's also sort of like playing along with that, with using harmonisation, reverb, and different stuff. So. Sorry, I don't know what happened. Sorry, I've lost that.
Just go back through the same link.
Sorry. Technology isn't my strongest, I must admit. Okay. part of that one. Won't go on. And I'll just play a bit more of the Schwartz collaboration with Flock, which is also inspired by the visual imagery of birds, a flock of birds. Okay. So, hello, yeah. Yeah, so I suppose, then I got a commission with West German Radio. I was in Amsterdam at the time, living in squats and all sorts of weird circumstances. And it was a really cold winter, and I got this commission, and I was homesick, and it was to basically, it was a piece basically about my experience in the Northern Territory before I came overseas, living there for 1 year. And sort of all these images came floating to mind with the colours and textures and birds and the wildlife and open spaces that I was really yearning for. So this work, Streamings, which I'll play, part of it's 30 minutes long, but again, it's sort of, I'm trying to get the sense of connecting with the longing and grief and the repetitive nature and the recurring nature of grief, but how there's also transcendence and hope. So in the studios of West German Radio, I worked with producer Klaus Schoening and for this multi-instrumental piece involving text and voice. And I'll play the sequence which has to do with that expression of grief, and then so there are different voices which sort of are sonic metaphors for different states of being. And the higher voice is really a bird that draws a line of flight and emerges into the sonic arena of that work. And then sort of departs in a sort of sense of like an ambiguity, basically. So, so I'll play a bit of that work here. Oh, this is starting it. So these are microtonal, extended microtonal techniques, which I'd spent years developing. Piano sequence. Place of rain heads, the wind cries through your limbs and crevices. I slept on your side and sang to your moon. You know no time, but you whisper your secrets forever. So this was actually done by laying one track and then working with that track and so on. So in developing this sequence. sorry if that was a bit long. Okay. Sorry, there's a bit of a ditch in that. Yeah, so does anyone have any questions about this work?
I'm going to ask you some questions if that's okay, Joe.
Yep.
Just because I like to control everybody. So many of us don't appreciate or come across free improvisation very much. So it's obviously very strange to us, to our ears. So I wanted to ask you some questions. First of all, can you tell me, this is going to be about lots of different things. So do you want to take a seat?
Yeah, sure.
Cornelius Cardew.
Yep.
Can you give us a little outline of your interactions with him?
I did have an interaction.
Oh, didn't you?
I had some interactions with John Cage.
Right.
Oh, so, yeah.
Do people know who John Cage is? Has John Cage been mentioned? John Cage is probably most famous for a piece of music called 4 minutes 33. That's a silent piece. It's in 3 movements, and each movement is marked tacit. You don't touch the piano at all.
It's very conceptual, yeah.
It's a conceptual piece.
Yeah.
And so what it did was it turned music around. People had to listen to what was going on in the room. And so this sort of made people think, actually music is going on everywhere all the time. So it was quite a groundbreaking piece. It's made fun of an awful lot. But what was your...
Oh, I sang in one of John Cage's operas, and that was an interesting experience. I was a guest student at the Hague Conservatorium at the time, and he was just happened to be coming along giving a workshop there, which was really quite interesting. And so he actually created an opera for the singers of the department using the I Ching. So he worked with the I Ching, so according to how the I Ching fell, that's when certain singers would come on stage.
I Ching is a divination tool based on coins from Korea?
China.
Japan.
Oh, what's going on? Anyway, there was sort of, we were working with his songbooks, which was graphic scores. So basically, the singer interpreted, the lines, a lot of Lenny lines, basically.
Yeah.
And each singer had a different interpretation. So sometimes two singers would collide almost with the same piece, but they'd interpret it differently according to the I Ching. Yeah, so that was quite fun, really. Yeah, and so that's all I can say about John Cage. He did go off looking for mushrooms, hunting mushrooms instead of giving lectures.
John Cage is a famous mushroom
he was
chef.
Not a chef, but he knew a lot about mushrooms. Well, he probably cooked them well as well. But anyway, they were pulled up by the police and for going on. Yeah.
He was just looking for...
I just think he was trying to get out of the academic thing, but when he was there. But anyway, that was interesting. Yeah.
So I'm interested, you mentioned at the start that you experienced synesthesia.
Yeah.
And synesthesia is the experience in one sense when you actually get stimulus on another sense. So maybe you smell something and you have this complete vision of somewhere else.
Yeah.
So
I have it fairly severely. I say it's it's not a mental illness, although it could be interpreted that, because when you get overloaded or flooded with it, you might come across as mentally ill or just totally distracted. But it's you can get triggers of my mind gets flooded with colours and I get certain triggers, and I often with some of my pieces I see the shapes before they actually happen. So I see the shape of I have a visual shape of the work in my mind, and that's like a score really. There's that experience of the actual viscerality of the sounds. They have a feeling, like a visceral feeling, and sometimes, as I say, it's you can get overwhelmed and sensory overload. So I have to work with that constantly.
I think it's an important topic because there's a lot of talk about mental health today, and a lot of experience of not optimal mental health. And one of the things for musicians have always been sort of considered a little bit outside the society, I think, due to some of our experiences with music and music making and sound making and stuff. A lot of this music, people used to think, oh, this is just madness, and it's dismissed. But for the people who do it,
Well, they have a very real interior thing, but going on, I think. I think that my music follows harmonic structures and dissonant and atonal as well. I mean, I think there is a logic in what I played today. I don't know if did people pick up on any musical logic?
musical logic,
Was there any musical logic, do you think, in what you heard?
Streaming definitely had it.
What's that?
Streaming definitely had it.
But anyway, I just want to stress that synesthesia isn't a mental illness. It's a neurological condition, and it could even be because I started playing music for so long that my wires were, from very young, my brain formed in a different way. Kids who learn playing from very young have crossovers. So it could be genetic. I don't know, but. Sometimes it's great for creativity, and other times it's a pain. That's all. Yeah.
and it's and what it highlights for me sometimes is our understanding of what is regarded as normal, and as individuals and as creators in sound, normal is something that's less and less definable.
Well, I mean, we're conditioned to live in a very one-dimensional world of materialistic world, and that's not the only world. That's what I think.
So in light of that, when you are improvising, I want to ask about what you regard the role of intention is when you improvise.
Well, it depends if you're working with other people or yourself. I mean, if you're working with other people, there's conversation and dialogue and musical dialogue happening. The intention, as I say, can be lots of different things. It can be creating a soundscape. It can be, in my case, bringing some of the visualizations, musical visualizations into form. It can be expression, it can be reaching emotional places that, aren't sort of openly, you can't usually express in day-to-day life, that are repressed, and so they're finding an outlet and a transformation. So there's a healing, there's a healing aspect and a strive towards wholeness. I know that sounds all very self-centered, but
Well, it's the experience of the self is just is the base experience, so it has to be selfish.
I suppose. It's a sort of but also it's great. I think if people can connect with it, because maybe someone's out there who really wants to voice something and they can't, or they can't because of their social conditioning, and so there are artists who actually embody that and help them in a way realise those parts of themselves they feel they can't access or express, and express it for them, like in a vicarious way. And so, I mean, that's part of the function of music, I think. So, you can express, and it can reach others in ways that they may not expect.
Yeah. That connects on a. I often think this I'm even questioning myself saying this music because it starts to say, oh, it's this, but it's actually everything. But I often think it's such an individual, it's such a subjective and individual experience to make this and to listen to it. So I just, yeah.
Well, I mean, as you were saying also that, I mean, our ilk age group grew up in fairly conservative. It's very different, I think.
We were kicking against the pricks, yeah.
Yeah.
I grew up in Queensland. We had
So-
police coming and bashing us up at gigs because we were youth having gigs, and they just did that. That was their fun.
I think it's the last child I was kicking back at a lot of things. So either I felt that I was going to be demolished, or I had to express back, push back.
Yeah.
And the way I did that was through singing and improvising. So,
Yeah.
and it's sort of a self-validation
Yeah.
as well.
I still think there's a lot of it. We still get responses to this, particularly from the mainstream. Like if I play my parents, some of the free improvisation stuff I've worked on, it's just like, that's not music. But to us, to the people who play it, I think it's one. And the other one I wanted to ask about was the role of emotion while you're doing this, because the emotion can be overwhelming.
Well, how did you guys find some of that cathartic stuff, like the wailing? I mean, how did you respond to it? I'd like to know that. Yeah.
It sounds familiar because I also do vocal stints at home, usually cat noises. So it was a pretty familiar experience. I also have synesthesia myself.
Oh, okay. So you can relate to some of that, yeah.
It's one of the reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got another question. I've noticed that everybody else I've met in real life who has synesthesia, they are often artists or musicians. And I'm wondering, like, is there a correlation? Like, why is that the case?
Well, I think maybe I think because the sensory experience is so strong, the internal sensory experience, like if I didn't, sounds crazy, but I'm going to tell you, if I didn't wear this neutral colour over this pink, I probably couldn't talk to you. That's how it works,
Yeah.
okay? I like to wear the pink because it's a warm colour. If I just had the jacket off which neutralises the pink, my mind would be flooded with red and pink and the correlating emotions, and I probably couldn't talk. And that's how it works. It's a very strange thing. I used to think it was absolutely nuts, but it's not actually. Synesthesia can be linked to autism. That autistic people, and I don't know, I haven't done a test, I might be on the spectrum, but autistic people can get, over sensory overload too. My sister has it, could be a genetic thing. So I think because some of those experiences are so powerful, they have to channel it somehow. That's my interpretation.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
And it's a sort of validation. And also it's just, it is a rich world. I mean, if you're a synesthete, it is sensorily rich. You want to do something with it.
And just a last question before we wrap up. Thank you so much for coming
You're welcome.
and talking to us. I've got like 7 questions here. What do you listen to?
Anything.
When you're at home, what do you put on the record player? Do you listen to much, or is it?
I haven't lately, but I listen to anything. I listen to ABC Classic FM, I listen to straight classical music, I listen to jazz, I listen to all kinds of jazz. Almost anything. Yeah.
Broad
Broad. Yeah.
acceptance
Yeah, I just try and listen. I just try and hear what the music's trying to tell me, basically. I'm not a very political person as far as genres. I mean, that's one thing about Amsterdam that was great, because it's far less categorised. There's so much more. There was so much more crossover of genres, and it was like effortless. A lot of people, the classical pianists, would improvise. They'd have these gigs, and it was just sort of like flowed, you know, and there wasn't this sort of compartmentalisation that we still have here. Yeah, so it was sort of very explorative in that sense.
Yeah. The compartmentalisation I've always
Yeah.
seen as more a economic drive. You know, people want to drive you into buying something that you like, so they keep adding to that one.
It's also to do with status quo and what people perceive as status, you know, and what is not, you know.
Yeah.
So they'll hook onto the high status thing, you know, and
What's perceived as high status.
yeah, I think so. I think that's
Yeah.
learned. I think that's culturally, it's a learned thing.
Cultural. Yeah.
Yeah, it's learnt, and I think my experience overseas, when I came back, I thought, oh, this is all weird, you know, because this
Yeah.
is just so restrictive. But you know, I appreciate it.
It is. Thank you so much for coming. Please
Thank you.
thank Joe Truby for it. And if you could also thank Patrick Lee for playing for us. That was really